Have you ever wondered what lightning flow is? When should you use it? When shouldn't you use it? What are some best practices? In this video, technical architect Meighan Brodkey discusses lightning flow in Salesforce for our journeys as admins, consultants, and developers. Welcome! It's Rachel and Jessica from 100 Days of Trailhead, the place where the tech community comes to learn Salesforce, learn tech, get inspired, have fun, and invest in ourselves. Whether you are brand new to learning Salesforce and starting from the beginning, or mid-career and skilling up for that new opportunity, we are your trail guides here to support you with an itinerary to help you get where you're going. You are in the right place. If you are new to our channel, make sure you hit the like and subscribe buttons. Don't forget to click on the notification bell so you can be notified when we release a new video. In the description below, you can find links on everything we mention in this video, in addition to links we find helpful like books that have helped us and our friends along our tech and Salesforce journeys. To find other helpful Salesforce and tech content, visit our blog at 100daysoftrailhead.com. In this video, Meighan Brodkey is discussing lightning flow components, lightning flow actions, and best practices. Meighan is a 12-time certified technical architect. She is also a Trailhead Ranger with 494 badges and counting. When Meighan is not working, she enjoys punk music, road trips, and penguins. Your quest, should you choose to take it, is to journey with us through the adventure of learning lightning flow. Your quest begins now.
Just be on the lookout because our plans for the 100 days of Trailhead celebration are going to be epic! Epic for you and epic for you. I'm sorry, that was my Oprah moment. Sorry.
Well, this one is Jessica Murphy, if you don't know.
Wait, who am I?
Oh, and I'm Rachel Watson. So we've been around. We're both MVPs. We do this, co-lead this. We co-lead Phoenix Salesforce Saturday, which was the second in the world. We do some other stuff, but that's not that important.
But what we love is hanging out with you guys and learn, for us all to learn together. So speaking of learning, guess what? We have the coolest speaker today. This is a lady that we've known for a while, and she is just brilliant and kind and funny, and we all became MVPs together. And the first thing she did was message us and said, "It's time to party." I love this girl. She is hilarious. Okay, so this is Meighan Brodkey. Meighan is a Salesforce MVP and technical architect with 12 years of experience in Salesforce. She currently manages the architecture team at Did I say that right?
Exceed.
Thank you. Exceed Consulting. She volunteers and mentors with Maribus, helping veterans and their spouses learn Salesforce. In her free time, she runs Ohana Slack, is a speaker at community and Salesforce run events, leads the Seattle Women in Tech User Group, is a Salesforce blogger, and enjoys sharing and learning with the community. And if I'm not mistaken, she's a speaker for Virtual Dreaming. So, without further ado, Meighan Brodkey.
Hi. Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for coming. I really appreciate you all being here, and so many of you. I'm so excited. And as Jessica and Rachel said, it's a weird time. So please take their advice. And if you're having a bad day, please make sure to reach out to somebody and make sure to talk to somebody. It's hard being stuck at home, and it doesn't matter if you're living with people or if you live by yourself. Those hard days can be rough. So just make sure to reach out to somebody and say hi. Or if you notice somebody's having a bad day, reach out to them and say hi. Start that conversation. So today, what are we talking about? So my specialties that I'd like to focus on when I am speaking are community, cloud, and flow. And so today we are going to be speaking about flow. And just to jump in, I'm going to do it this way and actually share my screen first because I'm not sure which way Google Slides likes me to do the presenting thing. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Awesome. All right. So we are going to be talking about flow components, flow actions, best practices, and bears. Oh my. That's a lot of stuff to be talking about all at once in one presentation. But there is so much to go over with flow. And to get started, what is flow? Great question. And more of the question is, what isn't flow? How many of you have used flow in work, or have connected flow to a process builder, or have flows within your org? Hopefully some of you, oh, that's right, we're all on mute. I'm sorry. So hopefully a large number of you. And if not, it's totally okay. So flows can be extremely intimidating. I know that when you work with Process Builder, you are given, the idea of you have your diamond, and your diamond goes to an action. And it's pretty easy to go forward from there. And Process Builders make mistakes, but they're pretty straightforward and pretty linear. So it's when you are working with them, you have a path, and you know what that path is going to be. With a flow, you have Spider-Man powers, okay? You are able to do pretty much anything that code does, but with great power comes great responsibility. All right. When you are given the power to delete, you got to be careful, okay? You do not want to be out there deleting and deleting the wrong things. You can work with custom metadata types. You can work with custom settings. You can create related records. You can go and update a bunch of different records related. You can go in a loop. You can assign variables from the account to from the contact and from this crazy other record that you found just because of a matching pick list value to the new opportunity you're creating, because you have all these superpowers. But you've got to be careful. You want to make sure that when you're working with your flows, you're thinking about the most strategic way to build it, and you're also making the right decision of, is flow the right choice? Sometimes just because you can build it with a flow doesn't mean you should be building it with a flow. If your flow is going to get too complex for you to be able to even manage it, it's not the best choice for you to use a flow. And it's a lot to think about, and it may not be what you want to hear, is that you shouldn't build it declaratively. But if you're not going to be able to figure out how to update it later, or it's going to be too hard for you to add to when you need to build something else, your build isn't going to be sustainable. And it's not going to help you with that bigger picture. And you're not just building for today, you're building for tomorrow. And in those cases, if you can't build something that's going to help you tomorrow, then it might not be your best option. But at the same time, flow can help you do so many things that used to only be there for you when you were a developer. You can now do declaratively. And I don't want you to be scared and think you should go code. You just have to think, is this the right choice? And there are many things flow can do that Process Builder can't do. And what we're going to do today is I'm going to go over a few different items and some slides. And we're also going to jump into my dev org. We're going to go through a couple of demos. We're going to look at some flow components. We're going to look at some best practices. And we've got some time for questions. So what is flow? Flow is an awesome declarative tool. Flow can be your best friend. Flow gives you a lot of choices. But at the same time, to put what is flow down on here, I ended up trying to go through, and it was just 10 bajillion slides. So flow is everything under the sun. So yes. So what makes up flows? Flows are actually made up of, and yes, they are your Spider-Man powers. Yes. What are flows made up of? Flows are made up of just a few small elements. You build flows on a palette, which is that screen that you are building on that has the start button. And you build your flows with elements, resources, connectors, actions, and components. And that's really all that it takes to build your flow. Now, mind you, there are a different number of different components within each one of these, but that's the foundation of your flow and how things get put together. And what we're going to go over in the next couple of slides here are what are some of these different pieces and how do you use them to be able to build some of the coolest flows that you will ever see. Knowing the foundation can help you get there. Now, once you understand your foundation and you know what each different piece does and how it works, you're able to move to that next level and just start putting them all together. Last year at Forcelandia, I talked about flow and when it came out, and about flow, when you use flow, you think differently. Rather than thinking about it like an administrator, when you're building with a workflow rule, and how you have step A, step B, step C, and you have that linear line, you have to start thinking like a developer and start thinking about more of that complex logic. And thinking about these different pieces here and how each one of them works and knowing what they are will allow you to understand how that complex logic works together. So, what are the connectors? So you have a couple of different types of connectors within your flows and how they all connect together. And they look different, which is helpful so that you can recognize them while you're working with them. And first you have an unlabeled connector. This is just what you have when you go from step 1 to step 2. For example, from going from screen 1 to screen 2, you have an unlabeled connection. This means there's no decision, there's no pause, it's not happening because something has broken, it's not part of any loops or any craziness. If you have a line that doesn't have anything on it, that's just a straight up connection called an unlabeled connection. Now, when you're working with decisions are how you decide, for example, if something is null. Null checks, oh, my poor team hears me talking about null checks left and right. I think I must come out of my mouth at least 3 times a week, if not more. Did you make sure to put a null check in it? Of course we put a null check in it. Sorry. Didn't mean to sound like a broken record. Decisions are used to find out if something has a value, if the value is this value or that value. And your decisions, similar to how on a flow chart, when you are coming out of a decision, you always have to have what that decision is listed on it. So you will actually have whatever you labeled that decision written in a little bubble on top of that line. So that way you will know, is this, because they did have, the type of financial services, or is this because they had the type of partner, or is this because they had the type of other that is not financial services or other? One thing I'll show you when we jump into that demo is always rename your default decision. You should never have any of these little bubbles that just say default. It'll help you when you're doing your debugging. The last thing you want to do is have it find out that it was the default decision. But if you've got 16 different default decisions, it's going to be a lot harder to try to find. You also have your pause configurations. They look a lot like the decision labels, or the decision connectors. And they're going to tell you, however, the amount of time that one is happening at. Pauses can happen at different time intervals. So just find out, is this the one that happens after 1 hour? Is this the one that happens after 1 week? Or is this the one that happens immediately? Then you have your faults. Oh my gosh, faults will be your best friend. Let me say, you want to make custom error handling. Especially if you have a screen flow, you're going to want to put these up too. I love them. Users do not understand Salesforce error -160000432-16 blah blah blah. Your Salesforce administrator has been notified. They're going to pick up the phone or shoot you a message or call you and say, I just got an error. It says this. Yeah, dude, I just got the email. Okay, I got it. So having a fault screen to tell them either you need to go back and fill this in. This is how you avoid a fault. Or saying, you know, an email has been sent to whoever your Salesforce administrator's name is, informing them that, when you were doing this activity, that this happened. Um, Please don't keep doing it repeatedly so I get flooded with emails. That would be great. Some sort of message on that screen, some sort of email to yourself, something. And these ones are bright red, so they're easy to notice on the palette.
Megan, we do have a question in
Yeah.
chat. How do you
Oh.
determine what action or message to use with the null check?
Yeah, awesome. Evan, great question. So that would depend on what you are doing. So when you are going through and you are checking to see if you have a variable, and when we jump into the demo, I believe there's a null check in that one, to go in to, let's say you are checking to see if contacts have an account on them before you go and update the account within your screen flow, because they're making a new contact. So the user goes in, they're creating a contact, then you go to create the contact. You have a decision. Was the account selected? And you can go in and say, was this account selected? Go over, decide that way. And then you can either go to a screen that says, the account was not selected, or you can, with these new fancy component visibility criteria, you could actually just bounce them back and make a value visible based on the fact that they didn't have something filled in. Well, I'm going to make a note right now on my fancy new dry erase board to make sure to pull that up when we go into the demo.
Awesome. Thanks, Megan. Because I know I've been working with flows, and there's an action for a chatter message, and there's a lot of ways to do that with fault handling. So that would be, and it depends on if you have a component, if it's a screen or auto-launched or whatever.
Yep. Yeah. And, whether you're using the fault or if you are using just the line, that depends as well, for if you're going from a decision or if you're going to be going from the record too. So you can actually do a decision and use a regular connector, or you can just use a fault as well. You have a lot of different options for how to set that up. One of the best practices, to bring up some best practices right now, is make sure when you are designing your flows, I draw them out on paper or dry erase board. I don't go into Lucidchart the first time to make them, because if I did, I would spend a bajillion hours trying to draw them in Lucidchart. It takes too much time to try to do every example that I have, because when you design a flow, you don't want to go with the first idea that you have. Maybe you do, but you want to come up with a few different ideas and draw those out and decide which of these is probably the best way for me to go. Maybe, you have the first half, right? But on the bottom half, you've got a few different ways that you can go for this, this one section of your flow. To sit there and to try to draw that on Lucidchart, for me personally, takes too much time. I'd rather draw it on paper. And drawing that out on paper for me takes less time. Then I can go back and put it into the Lucidchart when I'm good to go. And if you actually saw my notebooks, nobody else could actually probably decode half of these. They have a bunch of diamonds, a bunch of squares, and a bunch of things that say GR, LR for lookup, and then you've got your your UR for update records inside of little diamonds. But it's all about just making sure that I drew it out. I may not list every single field in that drawing, but it's just the main outline of my flow to figure out how do I want to do it? What's my best path forward? And so you could actually do that with a fault. You could do it with a line. It all depends on the way you go. So draw it out a few different ways, look at a few different options, but I'll show you about the null checks when we get into that demo. And then the last couple of items are for loops. Loops are pretty sweet. So this is where you are getting into some of that fun functionality that you do not have when you are working with code. So if you are working with a collection, which is a group of records, and let's say you have pulled up all of the contacts that are related to an account. You now need to update all of these contacts because the account was tagged as a do not contact account. You now need to update all of the contacts with a specific date. Or you need to update all of the contacts that are the primary contact with a specific date, but not all the rest of them because they're the only active ones or something crazy like that where it's not every single one, so you can't use a formula field. So when you go through with the loop, you are able to go in and take your records. The loop pulls out an individual record. From there, you can assign. So that's where you have for each item. That's the pulling out of the individual record. You do whatever you need to do within your loop. Then you go back to your loop at the end. And once you're at the end of that, you go back. Once you're on that loop element, you can then take the line and draw it out and says for the last item. And the after each item, the for each item, your fault, these are all default text. You can't change that. Your pause label and your decision text, that is going to be whatever the name of that pause is for the amount of time and whatever the name of that decision is. Not the decision itself, but the piece of that decision, whether it is this one is the financial services, this one is the biomedical engineering, this one is the other. All right. Next up, we're going to go a little bit faster through these ones so that we can look at the demo where this makes more sense because I like to look at stuff instead of talk about screens. So here, looking at your elements. Elements are the things that you actually use on your flow and get to drag and drop onto the screen for the most part. So there are a couple on here that aren't dragged and dropped onto the screen. That would be your core action, your apex action, legacy apex action, and there was another one on there, but we should be okay for those. And what these are the different things that you are putting onto your palette. These are the things that do actions within your flow. So you are updating records, you are launching a subflow. That main start button, which in your summer 20 orgs, I warn you, we're going to be using a super fun summer 20 org for the demo. So the start button has a big giant square, easy to find. Then you have your loops. So that loop item that we talked about with the connectors. Sending email alerts, that very dangerous Spider-Man delete. And going through those. Actions we talk about a little bit as well. And we'll take a look at some of those examples. But these are things that actually do things for you within the flow. Then next up, you have your provided screen components. And this one is always changing, and I love it. They're adding new components all the time. So one thing to keep in mind is that flow components can also be made custom. And we're going to take a look at some of those too. But some of your flow components can have validation, others cannot. When you put validation on a flow component or a flow field, what you put in there is true. So just keep that in mind as well. And so if you need something to be at 20% or more for ownership, for example, you would do the value of that field is greater than or equal to 20%. If you need something to be required, you need to mark it as required. Some cannot be marked as required, like the address component doesn't have a required option. And in that case, you have to go into a decision. So things that you need to think about are, how do I do the validation on this field to make sure that people put in the right value? And always remember to, if possible, include your help text if needed. If your field doesn't need help text, don't put help text on it if it's something obvious. People don't like to hover over and have an overwhelming amount of help text. Also, it gives you something to maintain that you may not need to maintain. So giving yourself extra work is never a fun choice. Also, with your pick list and things like dependent pick lists or your checkbox groups or your checkboxes, you can use things like your choices and your record choices and your pick list choices there. Super fun, super fun. And we'll talk a little bit about what those are and look at some examples. A pick list choice lets you use a pick list off of an object. One thing to keep in mind is it is not specific to the record type that you are using. You can't say, I only want the pick list values for this record type, because you're not working with a record. So you're going to get every pick list value. Record choices let you work with actual individual Salesforce records as your list, which is pretty cool. So if, for example, you have a state object and you only want to have a list of states, specific states, not all 50 states on there if you're using US states, an option available. Also custom metadata types, since you could call it custom metadata types. That would be an example of a record choice. So flow operators. This is where you work with assignments, conditions, and record filters. Filters example, record choice. Conditions would be, for example, your criteria. Assignments are when you are assigning values within that assignment variable. And your resources. So this is the cool stuff that you use to put into each one of those elements. So a choice, you can use this as a value, any value that gets assigned. So you can pop a variable in here, you can type this in, you can put a formula into here from the formula resource, anything that you want. Constants stay the same throughout your entire flow. You can't assign something to your constant. You can't change your constant. So whatever your constant is, your constant is. Formulas are awesome to use throughout your flow. If you need to, for example, calculate what is, if this company has, X number of employees and this is their annual revenue, what would their loan be able to be for a maximum loan amount? Global constants. If you've worked with a formula before and you've seen those $ exclamation point fields or exclamation point $ fields, you still have those in your flow. Those are your global constants. They're global variables. So you're able to get into those. You can access those. You can drop them into a formula. You can drop them anywhere you want. You also have flow variables that are available to you through your global variables. Those are available for your stages and anything else. Pick list choices, stages, which we're going to drop into for super fun. Text templates you can use for email, screens, anything you need. They're great for translating and if you need to do translations. And then your variables. If you are kicking off a flow off a record, if you want to have values aside from a process builder and for a record and go directly into an assignment instead of doing a get record, variables are going to be your best friend. So jumping into fun stuff. So components versus actions and how do these come into play? So some of the new things that are available with Lightning are flow components and flow actions. And flow components go directly on your flow screen. These can be as simple as a lookup field that has filter criteria. The standard lookup field is just a lookup field. So let's say you wanted to be able to have a lookup field where you're able to say that, you can put anything you want in it for a where statement. That would be a flow component. Two, it's not just a field level. You can go all the way to the extent of saying that you want to drop a full Lightning web component or a component within your flow on a screen. That is also a flow component. Flow actions do something within your flow. For example, at the end of a flow, if you want to navigate to a record instead of going to the very start of your flow again, or if you want it to parse a collection, or to go through a list of comma separated values. And what they do is they help you complete a piece of functionality that you just don't have out of the box. And the reason why you would use components and actions is because Flow is a great tool. And, I mentioned before that, sometimes Flow isn't the right choice. But if when you are evaluating, should I go with Flow or should I go with custom development? And the only thing that really is holding you back is the fact that, but Flow just doesn't have this one thing. It's just this one thing that I don't have. Rather than build the entire thing within custom dev, you can build that one small piece within Lightning components or as a Lightning action, and then do the rest declaratively. And that way, it's something that is easier to maintain. It is something an admin can maintain. And, you're able to then, keep the development small, keep the clicks higher, and, also make it so that you have less lines of code within your org. So, and then with the beautiful line here of components and actions, do we want to take a look at some? And I think we should. So I'm going to do how do I make it not? There we go. And we're going to jump on over into my org here. And we're going to jump to process automation. We're going to jump over to flows. And then I am also going to do this and go back to flows. We're going to go to this one and go to accounts on this one. So first up, I want to show you a screen that has a flow on it for the account. So everyone's favorite out of the box account, one of everybody's favorites, Express Logistics and Transport. So as you can see, I'm in my developer org here, and I am on an account record. I'm going to click on my user access tab. So what we have right here is we are actually looking at this component. So we have two items on this tab. This first one is a Lightning component that is being run by a flow. The second one is actually a flow with a Lightning component in it. Well, it looks so similar, right? It's just like, I don't think she knows what she's talking about, but I do, I promise. So I'm going to quick open up the page so that we can take a look at them. And then we'll jump and take a look at flow. Lightning speed. All right. User access. See, I told you, it's a flow component. That's right. So we just have a flow sitting in here. It's called the sharing settings demo. We have a single column flow because the two column, one thing about the two column is if you are working with two column flows, please be careful about your field placement and check how it looks on both desktop and mobile. Sometimes you work really, really hard and you finally get your fields to make sense on two column, and somebody else looks at it on mobile and your fields don't make sense anymore. So do a double check, make sure both those make sense. And then up here, we have this Lightning component that is called Role Manager. I'm going to go back to this sharing settings demo flow and open it up from here. By the way, I love that you can now open your flows from the actual page. That's so nice instead of having to go back and find it. Let me move my start button. So here, we start this flow with this pretty flow start, and we go into a decision. So the very first thing that we are checking is this record ID null? So please notice that there is a description written with this decision so that we know what is happening. And then we have yes in terms of is the record ID null? And this record ID is null, global constant of false. And then we also have that the record ID is not equal to quote marks. That comes into play with some of the code that have some background. And then we also have no. From the decision, if it says no, this is where we have a custom error screen. Look at that. So we didn't have a record ID. So we actually have an error screen that tells the user that this screen needs a valid record ID and it didn't get one. Either run it from a record page or use the debug log provided there for an ID value. So we're telling the user exactly what needs to happen for this. This is a demo, hence the flow debug log is written in here. This was for an actual end user. Probably would put a little bit nicer of a message on there. Something about administrator, not telling an end user about debug logs and having them come to me with questions about what's a debug log. If they do have that record ID, we jump over to the set sharing settings screen. And you'll notice that this is where we have our flow component. So this is a custom component. You'll notice that we have our input components up here. And if we type in role manager, it is down here in our set of custom components. Over on the side, we have our different items that can be filled out. Everything from API name to text for tabs, the actual record ID value, these available object types. If we, I don't know why is anything. If we go back over to our actual account page, those values are the, let's go to the one that's actually on the flow. Those are the ones that are in the drop down. This is the code that is being called. So in this situation, this component is actually using code to help it perform the actual sharing that it does and do the assignment of the shares. And then the type of capabilities. This one does read, write, read, and none. So does this one. And in terms of that, that is what is shown here for what buttons are available for the user to select. Same on this side when we type in the user's name. One thing that you'll notice is that this one shows the pause button. Usually when I set up flows, it drives me nuts if there is an ability to pause, but it's not a situation in which people would actually be pausing. It's important to make sure that you are keeping your flow screens clean. And I'm just a huge fan of, if you're not using pause, get rid of the pause button. So make sure to deselect that. Also, not really a need for help in this situation. It's pretty straightforward that you type in the username to add the user, and then here to click the button, and the one with the check mark is the one with is where the access is. Next up, talk about flow actions. Flow actions, back over to the flow. So flow actions are not found on the screen components. As I stated before, flow actions are found when your flow actually does something. And so you're able to drag over a flow action, and those are found under your types. And so if you were to type in here, so for example, navigate, of course, I can type. All right, let's just do C:. There we go. So here we have load web page. So load web page is where at the end of this flow, you could redirect them to a URL. And this would be the very last thing connected to, because at the end, we do want them to navigate to a URL in the middle of the flow. They would get lost and we would lose the actual flow. All right. Questions about flow components or the very quick view of flow actions before I jump on to the next one? All right. There's going to be more demoing, I promise. Okay. The next one, stages. Okay. Flow stages. So one thing that Salesforce has that is out of the box, functionality are stages. So stages are kind of like your path, and they actually require you to create a custom component for you to be able to see the stages. You use them together with the assignment functionality and then the flow global variable of current and active stage. And what are we going to do? We're totally going to demo this. So, jumping back. Don't go there. You're cheating. All right. So we're going to go to this one. And I'm actually going to jump to this page, double check what it was called. Let's do edit page. And we have on the, all right, so we'll go here. I think it's the questionnaire. Where are you? Hope everybody's having a great day. Application with stages. There it is. Perfect. Awesome. So here we are working with stages. And this assignment screen is a huge part of this functionality. So what we are doing is we are assigning the flow's current stage. And this is assigned stage 2. We also have, however, the fact that our stages, we have our stage 1 assignment. Stage 1 has to exist and it has to be numbered. And this has to be marked as active by default. To show you where the stage exists, this is listed as a stage. It is a resource. This is found right here when you go in. If we were to create another stage for stage 6, for example, we will mark this one as 6. We don't want to mark this one as active by default because we have stage 1 is default and stage 1 needs to stay active. It's saved. So stage 1 is active by default when we start. We go onto this screen here for our application with stages. You will notice here that you don't actually see the component. So you have 2 different ways that you can work with the stage component. You can either drop your flow onto a stage component, or you can make a screen component to drop onto here. But both of them, again, require custom development. However, they don't require an Apex class. They only require a Lightning component. So I'm going to go back and actually going to pull this up in my developer console. And I don't want you to get scared because I'm going to pull up the developer console. And I'm also going to let you know that the stage component comes straight out of the developer guide. Salesforce has it available. You can obviously customize it and have a developer customize it. But the one that I'm going to show you right now is straight up out of the dev guide. So I'm going to go down and go to, 1 second, one of these says flow stage. There it is, flow stages. Go. Go. All right. So right here we have our flow stages. And right here, they're available for flow screens. So this is the one that drops on flow screen. Have the controller, tells you its style, and it comes with its design component. The second flow stages component that is available, again, within the dev guide. So if anybody is scared to start coding or hasn't yet, this is a great way to start. So start with some of these components that are in the dev guide. Get to know them. They have a lot of the details about why you're doing what they are used for, use cases. It makes it fun and it gives you a lot of information. And then here, so this one here is available for all pages. This component actually gets dropped directly onto the page within the Lightning App Builder or within the Experience Builder if you're working with communities. It can be used on any object, and you will have your current stage, and then you also have your on status change to switch the status. Here is where you have your controller. Again, with this Lightning component, where it's going through and with different steps, error message. Again, comes with the style. And also, the design attribute is listed here, and that's just your flow name. Your design attribute is what shows up in your properties panel. Huge fan of the design attribute and the items that show up in the properties panel and making sure that some of the information is configurable, specifically on the community side, to be able to configure some of the things like branding and having some of those available is a huge win. Not everything within a community goes along with the branding that you use within the paintbrush in the Experience Builder. Sometimes people want to have some of their flows or their specific components have different branding, have specific links, different buttons, etc., with different colors, different text colors. And by having some of those attributes listed for them to be able to configure is a huge win. So when you're writing code, when you're making your components, think about the community side. And also when you're creating your components, please consider whether or not that component may be used elsewhere besides within the internal org, and add your community tags so that the people on the other side don't have to go back in and add them later. Really appreciated by somebody who is often out there and adding all of the community configurations to things. It's super helpful. So yeah, next up. We probably want to see this flow in action because that would be pretty fun. So, 2 seconds, power. I'm sorry. Of course the power is going down. I hope everybody's having a great time. I feel like I'm kind of rambling because there haven't been any questions. Okay, power. Okay. All right. So, to see this flow in action. Excellent. Let's do that. And again, I'm going to just drop it on this page. So if we go over here and we go to our flow stages, and we actually, actually this is a horrible example because this doesn't actually have stages. So the example is within the community, just go with where it was and do all communities and do your Dreamin' community and do, no problem, Joey, thank you. I will totally grab that link to the dev guide. And as for where to put the action, so if it is, so I would do it after if record create is the very last thing, I would put it after the record create. All right, so one other thing. So using the Summer 20 org, you'll notice that the screen for where your community pages are looks a little bit different. Isn't this awesome that they've organized it? Oh my gosh, it's about time. All right, here.
We're seeing the
Oh, I'm sorry. That's why. I was like, where's the little green thing? There you go. Can you see it now? Oh, wait. No, new share button. Can you see it now?
Yes.
Perfect. Awesome. So this is what I was talking about. Aren't these little page organizations awesome? So cool. And then you're like, I love how it's all grouped together. It's just so handy, and that they actually tell you if it's an object page or a content page. Um, anyways, but here is our flow stages component. And I typed in the flow name. I guess you could probably make this with a better developer, a list of the flows and a drop down. But I am not that dev, and I used the code off of that dev guide. So again, flow API name. And you'll notice here that we just have our stages listed. And I am going to go here to preview it to show you how this looks when we go through. So we're going to pick our language. Notice it went all pretty in green. Checkboxes are checked. Next up, typing in our name. We're going to say I'm an individual instead of a business. I am going to pick my carrier, type in my company of Exceed and my social. Got 9 characters in there now. Here is an optional file upload, and then go to next, which I have pop-ups blocked. At the end of this, I actually have the toast flow action. By the way, if you have things like pop-ups that you would choose to do for flow actions, etc., browser configurations still apply. If someone's blocking your pop-ups, it's going to get blocked. So things to think about. This same flow I actually have, because this is my beautiful demo org. So CSR2 is a clone of application with stages, just with a different name, because I like to play with stuff a bajillion times over in my org. And turn into 2-column flow within the flow component. One thing to notice is that, side note about flows, if you are within the experience builder, aka the community builder, your flows will not show when you log in as an internal user. I don't care if you're a sysadmin or if you're a sales guy, it will always show as the placeholder. The preview. I watch this is going to end up doing something different because it's summer. Oh no, good. Woo. All right. It's still, even when you're logged in, it's better if I'm on preview or if I click the regular org, it's still going to do this. To see a flow in your community, you have to log in as a community user. That's the only way to see it. So just a heads up when you're testing your flows, if you see this, that means you're just logged in as a standard user. Totally normal. That's not you. All right. More fun stuff with flows. I promise you we're getting close. We're going to talk a little bit about flows and their interviews. So flows have interviews. And what is an interview? So a flow interview is that time and that section of the flow. It's the flow's transaction. It's the flow doing its thing. And when a flow has an interview, if you have something within it that is going to send an email, create a record, you delete, if you need to approve something, do anything, it doesn't actually do those actions as they happen on the board and across your flow. Just because we have it look like a pretty process doesn't mean it's happening as it's going. The stuff happens at the end of the actual interview. But the thing is, with a flow, like a process builder, your interview isn't at the very end. It doesn't. You don't have to wait until it's completely over. Your interview ends when you have a local action, when somebody hits pause, or when the actual flow is complete. But if you're building your flow and you need to send an email or post to Chatter or submit for approval or do a quick action, you need to think about, when is this happening? When does this actually end? When is the next pause? When is the next local action? When does this end? Versus when am I creating the record, updating the record, or deleting? And is it going to happen at the right time? One of the things that sometimes happens is you think you're going to be able to update or use the data from a record, but that you need to use the assignment variables, or you're going to need to do a beget, or you're going to need to pull, or nobody's ever going to see that Chatter post. So your variables help you, but nobody's going to see it on the other side. So think about your end users and when they need it versus when you need it. And then also pauses. Pauses can be a pain. And make sure, but they can also be a huge, huge, huge saver. So one thing that I worked on last year when I was working on a flow with one of my coworkers was the idea of a forgot username flow for a community. Now, usually this would be something that has to be done by code. Because when you think about it, you are an unauthenticated guest user. This is somebody who has zero access to your org because they're a guest. You don't want them to be able to check the users and say, look up this user by this email address and send me an email, because that means they would have to have access to users. That sounds kind of dangerous. So if we go actually take a look at that flow, and I'm so sorry that this has so many demos. I hope this is okay to look at this stuff and that nobody's running out of time. Username flow. So what we end up doing here is we tried this with a pause, because of the fact that a pause can break things up, and a pause works with things like a mixed DML. So if you were to create an account and then create a contact and create a user, but now you need to go and update your contact, if you were to do that without a pause in between, you get a mixed DML. So we tried that same thing with this forgot username, and we ran into some problems because of the fact that it just wasn't going through because the user wasn't getting the email, or they were hitting an error. So we ended up coming up with the idea of platform events just based on the idea of the pause. We also tried subflows first. So this is where the sketching things out comes in handy too. We tried a pause, we tried a subflow, and eventually we ended up with platform events as our option, where they go through, they enter their information, that goes in, then we create this platform event, and then here's our pretty flow action that pops up a toast, and then it goes and it then navigates them back to the login page. And I think this is what I have a pause. No, I was hoping this was the one with the pause. I'm sorry. But then you go through. Anyway, pauses can be your friend in some situations when you have to do things like work with the mixed DML, but they also don't work in every situation. So things to think about, sketch your flows out. Next up, flow runtime limitations. So if you are using those pretty lightning components that make everything look so much more beautiful, those are not going to work in a web tab. Those are also not going to work with list buttons that are set to display in the existing window with or without a sidebar. And then the other time that your lightning flow runtime, and so the lightning flow runtime is not going to display, is when you are in classic. You're not going to be able to use the custom buttons or links that are set to display in an existing window with or without a sidebar. One other thing to think about is that you only get 17 digits in a number field but Salesforce gives you 18. So if you need that extra digit, perhaps you are going to need to use the text field and then convert your value with a formula. So little gotcha there that can happen. And then best practices. Always use your sandbox. Do not build a flow in production. Please, 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 please do not build your flow in production. You have Spider-Man powers, all right? Like we are all admins, developers, architects, consultants, people that use Salesforce. Please don't build in prod. Save yourself, save whoever's org that is, save the future, save your end users. Think clicks before code. And flow is how you can, and it's fantastic. I love it. So what is flow? Flow is your ability to create, your ability to update, your ability to delete, your ability to do lightning web components, your ability to do actions. Flow is your best friend, and flow is your Spidey superpowers and your ability to say, hey, we don't need code for that. So clicks before code. And then plan. I know I keep saying it, plan it, plan it, plan it. You know, should you use evaluate next or, you know, exist after criteria for process builders? You know, when using process builders versus flow, should it be a flow or a process builder? Do you actually need a flow? In your flow structure before building to eliminate a number of elements before you have to execute. Figure out your order of execution. And then run through your idea with your teams, your peers, a friend, sorry, typo. Go through a design review board, be it a formal design review board or, you know, a makeshift one. Get input from others. And, you know, even if you've been doing flow for a long time and you know flow, doesn't mean you know the right way for this one. You know, maybe your idea isn't perfect. Other people have different experiences. They've worked with different items. They've built other ways. So an example of this is, you know, I run ideas by my boss, Mr. Jim Ray, and my team, Ken, Patrick, Faith, and I run things by people in the community for my friends that know flow. And I like to get other input. I had a call just not even a week ago with Jordan from Banff Dreamin' to run through a flow idea I had with him for something I had built, and I ended up cutting out like half of my flow because we figured out a way to do it easier with input from him. And it's not that I was doing it wrong, it's just that he had feedback to help me do it better. And there's nothing wrong with getting ideas from other people. And fill in your descriptions. And I'm gonna go back to this one part. Sorry. When you are in your flow, and you have a decision, rename your default decision. And I know I said it before, but these should never say default outcome. When you are looking at your debug log, you will save yourself. And the fact that this just says yes is really kind of driving me nuts. This should say yes, the record ID is not null. Because the reason why is because when you are looking at your debug log and you move it to Finder, this API value is the text that you get. So when you're going through that and you're reading it, this is going to be so helpful if it's clear and easy to read, and you don't have to go back and try to find on your flow, what was the yes? Or what did industry mean? I got to go look at that criteria to figure it out. So make your life easier as well as anyone else that's ever going to have to debug. And then also for your naming, get a consistent naming convention. That'll help you too. Either, you know, do account ID var or var account ID, SO var for S object variables. Come up with something so that you know what all your variables are, what all your formulas are, what all your S objects are, and you can tell them all apart without having to go and look at the little column off to the side. Done. So I can keep putting your heads everywhere I want to click. To go and look off to the side to see what was that one again? What was the count? It's going to just make your life easier and everyone else's in the future. And then for record types, don't forget about the fact that stuff needs record types. Always do a get record to figure out which record type to use. You have some limits with change sets. Always make sure that you have deployed everything that is in your flow, or that you are deploying everything your flow references when you deploy your flow. Post to chatter, send email, and submit approval. They can be gotchas. So for example, if you are deploying a flow that includes a submit approval element, you actually have to manually add the reference approval process. Approval processes are wonky. I don't know if anyone else has ever experienced that. If you're on the Twitter, you may have heard about the approval process situations, or if you've used them. But definitely something to watch out for. Post to chatter and send email, you have to add submit for approval. You have to click the add dependencies button to add them to your change set. You can't just add them in your change set items. And then for if you have a flow that depends on a lightning component that's going to redirect you, you have to add that trusted site manually in the org you're deploying to. And then when you deploy, you only can deploy one version. If your flow is active when you deploy it, it's inactive when you get to the other org. And if your flow was not active when you were deploying, it takes the most recent version. So if you actually wanted 1.3 back because the last couple were just ones you were testing with, make sure you activate that flow, because it's not going to deploy the right one. I've done that. I've done that a few times. I actually just did that again. So you got to go in and clean up the ones you don't want. It just makes it easier. And if you are deploying or redeploying, it's going to create a new version number. One thing that's really nice is API version 48 finally took the numbers off of your flows in your metadata, which was a huge pain for version control. I don't know if any of you noticed that in your source control, but it was hard to keep track of it and to find out that, this flow version 3 in this org and this flow version 1 in this org were actually the same, because I had deployed, but they've got different numbers. Well, now they don't have numbers, so it's a lot easier to keep track of. Always, always, always check your null checkbox for your get records. So I'm going to jump back over here, and I'm going to pull a get record onto the screen. And let's do a count really quick. It always comes up there you go. And yes, I do the choose fields and assign field values manually. I don't like to use the store all fields. I don't need all fields. So yeah, but then I always choose this as when no records are returned, set specified values to null. That way it's null. I know I can check for null. It's not going to give me an error for null. You've got to think like code. Don't do a loop in a loop. DML at the end. Don't be making updates throughout your entire flow. Wherever possible, use screen flow for custom lightning component. Use dynamic variables in your global values over in your flow versus using formula variables. Make as few DMLs as possible. And then error handler. This is that custom flow screen. Like this guy. So pretty. And it's a huge help to you, to your end users, and fault emails. Build stuff that's reusable. They have flow templates now. Oh my gosh, they're so much fun. I know Jen Lee did a great session on flow templates for Automation Hour. Highly recommend checking it out. And then also know what triggers and doesn't trigger process builders as well as flows, now that flows can be triggered. Oh, it's supposed to be presentation mode, sorry. And then another one. So this one actually, person accounts. So this one got me. So person accounts and email alerts on a flow. Ended up having to build a flow component with this one to get a flow action to send HTML emails to a person account. This was so crazy. Just was having the hardest time to get it to send an email, and with person accounts and some of the limitations around there, flow, custom components working together so that you can stay declarative as much as you can. And then pause messages can't be changed. When you have deactivated users, pauses fail. And when testing a flow with a pause that has an error on the record, then you need to check your inbox for the error rather than assume that your message was successful. So this ended up happening with me on that account, contact, user, contact flow that I was talking about, where the mixed CML. So we weren't actually having an issue with, we resolved the mixed CML, but because of the pause, we assumed everything was fine, but we ended up getting the message later because we had the pause happen, but because it went into pausing, everybody thought everything was cool. Well, after the pause resumed is when we got the error message. So set your pauses for like 5 minutes or immediately, and then keep an eye on your inbox because it'll go into the pause, but that way you can still get the email and see what's going on. It doesn't matter if in reality it's going to be a year in the future, but that'll help you know during your testing. And your testing is not complete until after your interview has resumed and completed and your flow has gone all the way through. And that is because of the fact that your pause can resume at any, once that's over, you can still get an error later. So if you send a birthday email every year, you're not going to know that you have an error until that birthday happens.
Megan, we've got another question. Yeah. Melissa asks, can you check for null when you assign all variables?
Yes, you can, because I did that. I just did that on another flow. It's just that I don't like to use that one. I'm just that old habits die hard, and that only came out in spring 20. So give me another release or two, and I'll switch. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that was actually my last slide. So I could more questions. Let's do this. And by the way, thank you all for listening. By the way, I'm sorry I rambled so much.
Megan, I have a question relating to deployments.
Yeah.
You said with deploying a flow that calls an approval process, you need to add that approval process back in once you deploy as a post.
The submit for approval. If it's submit for approval.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
Are there any other situations where you deploy a flow that has like a subflow or another action and you need to do a post-deployment step similar to that?
So you should never be hard coding anything. And it's more so the fact that you have to manually add them with your deployment. Not, you wouldn't be editing your flow post-deployment. You deploy, but you need to make sure you're getting, it's because of the fact that it's not available for change sets. It's in that add dependencies area rather than available, kind of like moderation rules. You can deploy that, but they're not available for you to pick for a change set. You have to click add dependencies. Same with post to chatter, same with send email. All of those you have to click into and hit that add dependencies button, and you have to add them manually to your change set. Then you can deploy.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay.
You shouldn't be editing your flow post deployment. Yeah. Sorry for any confusion there. My bad.
It's okay. Thank you for clarifying.
No problem, dude.
Any other questions?
So I have a question, Megan.
Yeah.
As you know, the flow I'm working on, which for the rest of the group is my very first real life flow. I'm a developer, and I have done them on Trailhead before. And I want to add a comment before I ask my question. Megan, I think that as soon as you start using save all variables, you will love it because you don't have to define any variables, and it's so much easier.
Yeah, but it names it after the name of the component, but that's not what I name my variables. It doesn't match my naming convention.
When it lets you dig into the actual name of the object, what it's actually named, the API name and the label. So anyway, that wasn't my point. My question is, my boss has finally accepted the idea of using confetti. And in this, yeah, exactly, Christy. Woohoo, confetti. But he asked if I could do two different things with finishing this flow. One was redirecting from the custom component to the account, the specific account that is a lookup on the custom component, which you have taught me tonight that I can do because I was struggling with buttons and URL stuff. And now I've figured that out, that I can do that from an action. But I'm wondering, and this may be something no one's ever tried in this conversation. I'm wondering if you can have confetti, like redirect them to the component, the custom component that they're on, have confetti, pause for 2 or 3 seconds, and then redirect them to the account.
So you can definitely have confetti. It takes a couple of seconds for it to go to the next action and then redirect to the account. So on this one, I show a toast, and then it does the redirect when you're on the actual community page for the forgot username. And so when they go, they type in their email address. It pulls a toast up to say, please check your email, blah, 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 whenever there's success. And then after that, it goes and it takes them back to that login page so that they can go check their email and they're right back on the login page instead of staying where they are within the community. And there is actually a component for confetti on the unofficial flow site. It's a flow action that you can check out. It's the SF unofficial flow.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that you could call that from your flow.
Absolutely. So you would set it up just like this. So after you're done with your create, you would then go into your confetti, and then you would go to your navigate to record.
Oh, so cool. I can, yay. Always great to make the boss happy. And to learn how to do it after hours, you know.
Right.
Thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
All right. Does anybody else have any other questions? Oh, God. Go away.
Oh, and by the way, so this, Evan, really quick, so this is the example of a fault where you go from something such as a create record, you would go directly to, so I just went to this navigate to URL, but you would go to something like an error screen, or you would go to an email that you would send to the admin. And that way, if you didn't find records, or if you had an issue creating, then that fault screen could come up.
Where'd you get that fault connector from?
So the fault connector comes up. So you're allowed to pull a line over anytime you still have a dot. Now, since I've already connected my create record, that means that there's nothing left to go off of here. So the only thing left is the fault.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
Thanks, Megan, for following up.
Yeah, for sure, dude.
Yeah, I've
I'm
learned
not
a
going to
lot.
forget you.
Thank you.
All right, does anybody else have any other questions? We have like 5 minutes.
Anyone else coming to Virtual Dreamin'? It's going to be a lot of fun if they're able to make it on Saturday, May 16th, 10 a.m. Myself and one of the guys from my team, Kenton and Sandy Miguel, we're going to be presenting on Control the Storm, Become a Lightning Community Master. It's 10 a.m. Pacific. So all you non-Pacific people actually get to sleep late that day. Lucky you.
That's
Love to
awesome.
have you
That
there.
means I might actually make it.
Right?
Jessica and I are doing a Shine Theory talk as well. Anybody else doing?
I'm
something?
talking. I'm speaking on data protection and security.
Sweet.
I think
We're meeting for the first time. Hi, this is Jessica. We're talking on Twitter.
So let's post our sessions in our community, so we have it all in one centralized place, so we can support each other. Just like we started
That's a
out
great
talking
idea.
about. We support each other, so let's all do that.
Yep.
All right. Whoever starts the thread, it doesn't matter who. We can all just comment underneath there, so it's all in one place.
Yeah.
Awesome.
That it?
Very cool. Anybody else? Questions, or anybody else doing any talks for Virtual Dreaming? Take that as a no. Okay. So thank you very, very much.
Round of applause for Meighan. Woo! You killed it. You're awesome.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you so much for having me. Thank you. I really appreciate it. Thank you all for attending.
Absolutely. So just as a little tidy up, don't forget that if you did participate in 100 Days of Trailhead, please go to 100daysoftrailhead.com relatively frequently, because we're going to have updates there. You might need to do a few things to submit to, so you're for sure part of that competition, because we don't want to have people that could have won not win, if you understand where I'm coming from. So please, 100daysoftrailhead.com, super simple. And we will have a celebration. We're still working that out, because everybody has to reimagine their things related to, whether it be conferences or anything, meetings, anything else. So bear with us and everything. We're working on that, and we have some really good ideas, and we've been tossing those around. So just be patient, and I promise it will be well deserved.
Well worth the wait. And lastly, in Meighan's talk just now,
Yes.
will be in two places. It's going to be in our community, and I know not everybody's a member of our community, and that's okay, because it will also be on 100 Days of Trailhead. We were trying to get her in before the end of the 100 days. It just didn't work out, but she is a part of the 100 Days of Trailhead, so we're going to put her on, and we're so excited because it's a talk on flow, and it's going to be on the website as well. So we're pretty excited.
All right. Well, thank you, everybody. Thank you for spending the evening with us. Thank you, Meighan, for taking the time to present, and we will see all y'all soon.
Right.
See all y'all.
Thank you.
All y'all.
Oh, yeah, exactly.
Take care, everybody.
Bye.
Bye, everybody.
And with that, we're at the end. Are you currently using Lightning Flow? If you are, how are you using it in your Salesforce org? What advice would you give people who are starting to use Lightning Flow? What would you like to see in future videos? Comment below. We would love to hear your thoughts in the comments. If you've made it to this point, we want to take an opportunity to say thank you. Since you stayed with us, here's a bonus. There are many ways to automate processes in Salesforce. If you'd like to know more, check out the book, Practical Salesforce Development Without Code, Building Declarative Solutions on the Salesforce Platform. You can find the link for this book in the description below. Thank you for spending time with us. Make sure you like this video. It helps a lot. Click subscribe and on the notification bell so you never miss another video. We also handpick these videos, which we recommend you watch next. You can talk to us on Instagram, Twitter, and on our website at 100daysoftrailhead.com, all of which are listed below. Thank you for learning with us, and we'll see you back tomorrow.